I am a temple who walks the earth. My womb is fertile for giving birth. I am a woman planted in truth. I grow my branches from sacred roots. You are the form of who you want to be. So come untethered, your soul is free. We're here to heal, we're here to thrive. We are a dream who's come alive. We light a candle, our hearts awake. Illumination for God's sake. A revelation for God's sake. An evolution for God's sake. An inspiration for God's sake. 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 For God's sake.
And so it is. Hello, Essence. This is Jody England, and you are listening to Wild Soul Medicine Radio. If you are joining us live, thank you for hanging in there after a few technical difficulties here this morning. This is actually our third attempt, so we thought we were on the line a couple other times, and alas, we were not, and here we are now. So I'm going to give just a minute for Viv to post everywhere and let everyone know to refresh the page and to get on, and I apologize for the confusion with all of that. And of course, it's perfect. It's so perfect because I was just checking in as I was navigating the turbulence of the beginning of the show. And of course, in the email announcement about the show, I was saying like, oh, I've reached this really peaceful place of no turbulence in my life. And so let's talk about if turbulence is necessary. And then I end up creating a bunch of turbulence right as we join. So that's how it is with energy is, you can't actually speak about something without being in the vibration of it, which is also perfect because there's medicine in all of it. And actually that's what I want to talk about today is, can we let go of turbulence being a story? Can we let go of, things being good or not good? And what does all of that look like? So that's the discussion we're having with a beautiful demonstration here right up front for those of you who've been trying to get on, and for me as I prepare to open for whatever is wanting to come through for us today. So let's just settle in. Let's actually settle in together and receive a breath, allowing ourselves to come into presence with what is, with whatever's true for us right now. And see if as you just receive a couple breaths, if you could allow yourself to be in the grace of this moment, to just be fully here, letting go of whatever stories you may have carried in with you or what you're preparing to go to once we are complete. And just see if you can give yourself the gift of allowing your mind and body and spirit to be all here in the same place at the same time. Yeah. Good, 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 good. Perfect. And then tend to your energy space now that you're here. Use your own skills and awareness to see, what does your system need more of or less of right now? Do you need more grounding? Do you need more spaciousness? Do you need to slow your heartbeat or slow your pace? Do you need to fill up with life force? What is calling for your attention right now? Yep. Yeah, so I was just using that space to receive some downloads from The guides who watch over this program, they keep me so honest, which I love and appreciate. And also it keeps me uncomfortable and on edge and like on my toes, which is, good. So our topic for today is this idea of, do you have to burn your life down in order to transform? And I think it's curious because I have certainly had this inquiry over the decade plus that I have been on this very radically fast transformational path. And, and what I mean by burning your life down is this sense of just when you think you're comfortable having to let it all go or step into the next iteration or, always finding yourself in some kind of turmoil or upheaval as you reach your next evolutionary plateau, and then suddenly your relationships don't fit together anymore, or your job doesn't actually work for you anymore, or you no longer can put up with things that you've been putting up with. And so, on this path, there's a lot of discussion and embracing of this idea that, that's transformation. And as I dipped into that today, I felt like I actually have some things I want to say about that because it certainly has been an inquiry for me. And so when I initially began my path, I was really afraid of this idea of having to let things go because in a certain way, I've been really capable and competent in my life. And so there was a way that my life was, quote, working. And I was afraid that if I started to mess with it too much, I would upset the apple cart, right? So, many years ago when I was, had a couple businesses going, they were not really in alignment. We were in a property that we couldn't afford. We were, my marriage wasn't going well, but certain things were working. And so, the feeling was like, well, I don't want to speak a truth, or I don't want to quit this thing that I can feel is out of alignment because a lot of people are counting on it. And, and so I would stay out of fear, and I would stay because it felt like I should, or like I could somehow fix it, or there were lessons I hadn't learned yet. And so I ought to stick around until I had learned the lessons. And then when I had learned the lessons, everything would be perfect. And so, as I moved out of that phase, I started realizing like, okay, you can't fix things by staying in what is misaligned. There is a certain point where you have to let go and you have to become unattached. And so I got better at that. Like, okay, everything is always on the table. So anything can change at any point. And, if things aren't working, I'm willing to let those go. And and that served me better. I definitely was able to transform quicker when I wasn't trying to claw onto my old life or whatever modicum of comfort I felt like I had created for myself. And again, like then I would hit these plateaus. So it'd be like suffering, and then plateau of goodness. And then like, okay, now I'm going to hang on to this goodness. This is way better than before. I'm glad I let go of that thing that I was holding on to. And now I'm going to hold on to this thing, this good part. And so, then I would live in some fear of like what the next transformational thing would be called for, or like what the next piece would be that I would have to let go of. And I would, not really want to do that. And so, so as I've reached this beautiful point in my life where I'm definitely the happiest I've ever been and the most resourced and the most satisfied and all of that, what I've become aware of is that old pattern wanting to show itself of like holding on to this part, and also having arrived here because I've gotten better at detaching, not only from the stuff that isn't working, but from the stuff that seems to be working. So there's this sweet spot of detachment where it's like, yes, this is all really fun. This is fun and beautiful, and I'm enjoying parts of it. And it's also not real. It's not any more real than the realness of the conflict when a relationship is falling apart, or when a when your business isn't working. Like that feels really real, but it actually isn't. It's all just a story. It's all just a projector screen that you're making something mean, So in this inquiry, right, of like, what is this? And I also start to notice in this transformational community, there's starting to become a little shadowy piece of it comes along with this vulnerability movement, where people are using vulnerability as a marketing tool. So it's like, I'm going to share something really vulnerable with you. And then the vulnerability is my life is a mess, and part of all of that is then people constantly talking about it's a really intense time right now, or there's so many, there's this heavy energy that's happening, or the full moon is making this, And I just become curious if we're becoming a little addicted to the drama, right? If we're becoming addicted to this idea that transformation can only happen through pain. And where I'm sitting in this moment around it is it's neither one nor the other, right? It's you can't. Let me just think how I want to say this. So transformation happens. That is true. And transformation, in my definition, is evolution, is changes, it's shifts, it's awarenesses, it's expansion of consciousness. And so if you are committed to excavating the truth of who you are, transformation will always be happening. And then what either makes that pleasurable or painful is the story that you are telling yourself about it and about everything around it. So, there's a few pieces that I can feel in here. There's, first of all, this idea of detachment. How can we hold our lives more loosely so that we can be fully in them, we can be fully present and of them and enjoying them all the way to and through, and constantly dying to them in each moment. It's a lot like Shavasana. If you practice yoga, Shavasana is the pose at the end where you lay like a corpse. It's called the corpse pose, arms out. And the idea is that you do that at the end of each practice because you are dead to that practice, right? That day, whatever happened, whether you did the best yoga ever or whether you were tight and stressed and you didn't really, do what you wanted to do, like whatever happened, you just let it be done. And I feel like it's such a good practice in our lives to do that, because we're actually, we're so conditioned toward the quote positive, that you're only doing transformation right when you're either really suffering for it or you no longer have any suffering, right? So your life is completely together. And, and so often my clients will come and they'll, we've been working together for a while, and then they come like, oh man, I really got in the shit this week, and they're beating themselves up because they had another quote issue. And what I always say is, of course you have another issue. You're a transforming being in a human experience. That is the whole point. That is the thing. And for me, that is the stable point underneath all the rest. Like that is the constant, is really the space in between. And I think, in our culture, we really do have this, we're so results oriented. We're so experience driven that everything is about, getting an A+ on the report card, or, evaluating what has been and what will be. And it's all about direction and striving. And, really at the base of the base is beingness. That's where we are just in this moment of presence. And so there is no like, oh, my relationship is ending and so I did that wrong, or I need to fix this, or, or I have to leave this job, but I have to set this other thing up first, right? Then you're kind of waffling between the past and the future. But I want to just invite us today, what if your transformation could happen from the seat of beingness, right? And if you could find immediate peace by just allowing yourself to arrive right where you are, so that you can arrive here right now, even if you haven't cleaned up whatever you think needs cleaning up, even if you haven't manifested money, even if you haven't paid your rent, even if you don't know where you're going to live or work next month. But you could just, in this moment, embrace the transformation that's calling us, which is really just being here. Being here in essence, where nothing else matters. It really is pure bliss. It's pure bliss that you can bring yourself. And I think that's the danger of even looking at this path of transformation, right? Path sort of implies there's a here and a there, and there's a motion forward. And so often, the home node is actually not moving at all, but just settling and opening. Yeah. So I want to talk a little about what keeps us from that, because I know that certainly so many of my clients right now are in the experience of feeling like their lives are burning down, because so much is falling away, and it's stuff that they were used to and that they liked and that they were attached to, things like husbands and houses and, stable careers and things like that. And I have certainly been there with so much of that. And so, so I have a couple of practical things to say about that, which is, of course, you're attached because that's part of the evolutionary path is you have to get attached, and then you have to learn that attachment actually doesn't serve us and isn't important and isn't even, it's not a thing. We think that we're attached because we think we're controlling something or we're doing something or we have something. But all of that is actually an illusion too. Things are really just moving through our space. And so, what happens is as you start to wake up and change and shift your vibration, there can be this shifting in your life where things that are no longer in alignment with your vibration begin to vibrate out, right? And so certainly you are welcome to have emotion about that. You can struggle and fight all you want with that. I certainly have done that over the years, and it's an easy go-to for me. I like to struggle. And after having done it for so long, I'm starting to have this space of questioning, do I have to struggle? What if I just let it go? What if I just let anything go in a moment, And so this is part of the discernment. So, okay, a couple pieces. The first piece is, I would say if you're in a transformational process and a lot is shifting for you right now and it feels like you don't have anything to hold on to, what if you could allow yourself to move all the way into that? So what I find is the dynamic is everything starts to fall away, and it's kind of like you're grappling and grasping for what can I still hold on to? And it's that motion of wanting to still hold on that makes the falling away feel miserable. It also makes it take a lot longer, right? Because energetically, as you're trying to reclaim what was or understand it or prevent it or or whatever you're trying to do still in relationship with it, it's causing it to hang out. And so if you could imagine energetically opening up your hands and free falling into what's next. This is what I find is that so much of this pain and struggle that people go through in transformation and so much of my own was prolonged by my attachments. Prolonged by my belief that I had to still hold on to something, or I had to slow down the transformation, or I had to navigate it or control it in some way. And then that just made me flail a lot longer. It's kind of like when you're drowning and someone's trying to give you a life raft, but you're struggling so much you don't actually grab the raft, but if you would just stop struggling, you would float. If you just actually totally relax, you can't kind of relax and float. You have to actually put your head back and let go and allow the water to lift you. And so what if you were surrounded by a force that is wanting to lift you, and all that's required is for you to let go, to lay back, to put your head in the water. You don't even have to trust, you can float without trusting that you'll float. All you have to do is actually let go. That's the only requirement, is the letting go. Yeah, so just try that on for a minute, right? The ego is what wants to come forward and say, yeah, but, if we float all the time, how will we pay our rent, or how will we blah, blah, blah. And, so thank you, ego, for keeping us safe. And, that will all come forward. But first, this muscle has to get exercised. First, this opening has to occur. So I guess, what I want to say is, if you're in the middle of struggling, if you're in the middle of the burning fire of what used to be your life, the invitation is, how can you let go even more so that the fire can become the phoenix, so that you can just rise from the ashes? Because that's what inevitably happens. That is the cycle. It's like the burning and the growing, and the burning and the growing. So that's one way, right? That's one way is, if you've been struggling or you're in the struggle, it can look like that. The other way, which I feel like I'm growing into, I certainly do not have it mastered, and it's obviously easier to play with when you're in one of the easier spaces, right? Where there's not a lot falling away, but I'm playing with this idea of letting go proactively, so that even as I'm enjoying the abundance in my bank accounts, and even as I'm having this renaissance with my husband and our relationship, that I just hold it all really lightly. Like, this is beautiful, and my essence is the center point, So in that way, it's like I don't have to hold on as much. I don't have to worry about if he transforms with me, or if this business deal works out, or if I become a better mother. I don't have to worry about all of that. I just have to, I just get to be. I don't have to do anything. I just get to be. And so, it feels like there's actually this beautiful poem that I wanted to share with you. It's kind of a poem, kind of a reading. It's called Fear of Transformation. It's from the book of the Essene Book of Days. And it's kind of long, but I think it's such a beautiful illustration for us to energetically get a pulse on what this thing is that I'm talking about. Because I can feel as I'm talking, some of your egos are like, but she doesn't know that I've got this drama and that drama. And, and I do know, believe me, I know. When I was going through my bankruptcy, when I was, letting go of my business partners, when I was, in a conversation with my husband about whether we would stay together or not stay together, I've been there. I've been in all of that, in all of it. Not knowing where I was going to live, not knowing what the next step looked like. And, and I've had this question a lot of, sometimes it was presented to me like, oh, you have to not know where you're going because it's faith. You have to have faith, and that's what's being tested. And that never set exactly right with me either. And then there's like, well, you need to grow trust and trust that the next step will be there. And certainly trust is an edge I need to grow. And I just get curious about the mechanism. Like, what makes it painful? Does it have to be painful? What could make it less so? And it feels to me like the answer to all of that is this sweet spot in between of actually practicing unattachment, dying to what is and what will be, so that you can be fully alive in the presence and the constants of essence. Right? So this reading is Fear of Transformation from the Essene Book of Days. Sometimes I feel that my life is a series of trapeze swings. I'm either hanging on to a trapeze bar or swinging along, or for a few moments in my life, I'm hurtling across space in between trapeze bars. Most of the time, I spend my life hanging on for dear life to my trapeze bar of the moment. It carries me along a certain steady rate of swing, and I have the feeling that I'm in control of my life. I know most of the right questions and even some of the right answers. But once in a while, as I merrily or not so merrily swing along, I look ahead of me into the distance, and what do I see? I see another trapeze bar swinging toward me. It's empty, and I know, in that place in me that knows, that this new trapeze bar has my name on it. It is my next step, my growth, my aliveness coming to get me. In my heart of hearts, I know that for me to grow, I must release my grip on the present, well-known bar to move to the new one. Each time it happens to me, I hope, no, I pray that I won't have to grab the new one. But in my knowing place, I know that I must totally release my grasp on my old bar. And for some moment in time, I must hurtle across space before I can grab onto the new bar. Each time, I am filled with terror. It doesn't matter that in all my previous hurdles across the void of unknowing, I have always made it. Each time, I am afraid I will miss, that I will be crushed on unseen rocks in the bottomless chasm between the bars. But I do it anyway. Perhaps this is the essence of what the mystics call the faith experience. No guarantee, no net, no insurance policy, but you do it anyway because somehow to keep hanging on to that old bar is no longer on the list of alternatives. And so for an eternity that can last a microsecond or 1,000 lifetimes, I soar across the dark void of the past is gone, the future is not yet here. It's called transition. I have come to believe that it is the only place that real change occurs. I mean real change, not the pseudo change that only lasts until the next time my old buttons get punched. I have noticed that in our culture, this transition zone is looked upon as nothing, a no place between places. Sure, the old trapeze bar was real, and that new coming towards me, I hope that's real too, but the void in between, that's just a scary, confusing, disorienting nowhere that must be gotten through as fast and as unconsciously as possible. What a waste. I have a sneaking suspicion that the transition zone is the only real thing. And the bars are illusions we dream up to avoid the void. I'm going to read that part again. The bars are illusions we dream up to avoid the void, where the real change, the real growth occurs for us. Whether or not my hunch is true, it remains that the transition zones in our lives are incredibly rich places. They should be honored, even savored. Yes, with all the pain and fear and feelings of being out of control that can, but don't necessarily accompany transitions, they are still the most alive, most growth-filled, passionate, expansive moments in our lives. And so, transformation of fear may have nothing to do with making fear go away, but rather with giving ourselves permission to hang out in the transition between the trapeze bars. Transforming our need to grab that new bar, any bar, is allowing ourselves to dwell in the only place where change really happens. It can be terrifying. It can be enlightening in the true sense of the word. Hurtling through the void, we just may learn how to fly. Yes. And so I would love to invite, for those of you who are listening, to share your questions, to deepen this conversation with me by sharing what it brings up in you, What are you still holding on to, or what are you still wondering about this idea of burning your life down to transform? And you could do that on the chat page, which is wsmrchat.com. Or if you're listening on the app, you can go, I think it's on the second page, you can just click on our Facebook page. That's where the chat happens. So go ahead and just post any questions or reactions you're having to this conversation. And I'll take a look and see if there's anything that serves us to bring into this discussion. And I just was feeling into like, okay, so where are we? Is there anything that's still up for people? So the piece that I want to also speak to is discernment, because I feel like for some of you, depending on your soul path, letting go is actually the easy part. And the letting go needs discerned as to whether you're letting go because you're running away or avoiding landing versus you're letting go of something that doesn't serve you, you know? And so it's not always easy. I think that's what makes it so rich and delicious is being in that place of deciding what to let go of and what to keep, or where to stand your ground and receive the medicine and learn the lessons, and where to call misalignment and move forward into something new, you know? And the thing is, there is no one answer to that. It depends on so many factors. It depends on your soul path. It depends on your circumstances. It depends on where you are in your evolution, you know? And for me, it certainly has been some of both. And so I want to just speak to the practicality for a moment as well, that it's not, what I'm saying is not just let go of everything all the time, right? You are going to need to stand and do some work. You're going to need to move your shit. You're going to need to get clear and excavate essence, because as you do that, it frees your ability to be in that space in between. It allows you to have access to the anchor of you-ness that is the only real thing, you know? And so there's, you know, these confusing places in between. And, you know, I'd like to just share a few examples of what that has looked like in my own life by way of illuminating you know, where you might begin to look into whether it's time for standing your ground or moving on, you know? So, and before I say that, I want to just say, so there's a distinction. There's a distinction between standing your ground and being unattached. So the unattachment attachment would be, I need this to turn out a certain way, and so I won't speak a truth, or I won't see something that needs to be seen because I'm afraid of what the outcome of that might be, you know? That is the place where I think a powerful distinction can be made. And so I'm always in favor of more consciousness, of more seeing, of more awareness. And then the question is, how do we integrate that into our lives so that what happens as a result of that seeing and awareness and consciousness doesn't always feel like crap, you know, and doesn't always feel like we're in turmoil then. So, gosh, where to start? So I'm called to share as a snapshot from my relationship with my husband, who is just such a peach of a gem of a man. And I did check with him before I shared this to make sure he was cool with it, because it really is a deeply intimate piece of our recent relationship. But, you know, this is an area in my life that has always been mostly on the list of pretty good, let's not rock the boat, you know, like, we are soulmates, we are partners, we are deeply close friends. We've been married for 18 years, together a few years before that. We've known each other since the 6th grade. So, you know, there has always been a sense of familiarity and peace, and, you know, we like each other. And, you know, because of that space of like a kind of the zone of excellence or the zone of good, there has been a resistance on our part to sometimes do the deeper work that might have been calling, you know. And it's actually funny as I reflect on it now. wanted, in the year when I learned to read energy and I was apprenticing with my teacher, I had an agenda that year. My agenda was all about my work and my business and wanting to work with him. And, I had this whole plan which I was very attached to, very, very. And it used to annoy the shit out of him. So I would come to have my session with my mentor, and he would say, okay, what we're going to look at today is your relationship with your husband. And I was like, what is he talking about, this relationship thing? Oh my gosh, I'm fine on the relationship. What I need to know is how to get clients or how to expand, my group program or this or that, And so, in hindsight, when I look back, everything that he was seeing is exactly what I needed for my foundation. It was such a huge part of where I wasn't in essence, but because I had it at a certain state, I felt like I was able to skip that part. So, of course, we always have had the regular ups and downs in our relationship, and sometimes there's conflict and sometimes there's not, and sometimes we were close and sometimes we weren't. And, and that all just kind of felt like, well, that's marriage, kind of like how people say well, that's transformation. You're going to have some good parts and then you're going to have some, crappy parts. So, so recently we were in so things were going very well in the business. Things were going very well with me personally, and not so well in the relationship. But again, I was like, I'm not addressing that right now because I don't want to bring any, drama to my life. So again, there's where the attachment has us not see something that we otherwise need to see. So what ended up happening is my husband had been doing a lot of personal work, and so he spoke a truth to me. And this happened actually shortly. It was actually the day that we celebrated Christmas. And so he spoke a truth to me. And the truth was, I don't feel like you like me very much. And he said, and I'm sick of it, which he actually had never really said. He'd never called me on that. So there was a certain way that I was going through our experience feeling that. And also kind of being yeah, he can't even see it. So I wasn't seeing it. He wasn't seeing it, blah. So when he said that, then it compelled me to speak a truth, which was, you're right. And then I spoke a lot of other truth behind that, a lot of stuff I'd been avoiding saying for a really long time. And it really scared both of us. And then that conversation quickly led to this seems hopeless. Maybe it has to fall away. If this is the truth, maybe it has to fall away. And it was so surprising because we went from Happy Family Christmas Day to what are we talking about here? Are we talking about separating? What, how do we fix this? And, I'd like to say that because we're both so committed to this idea of detachment and evolution and being the highest versions of ourselves and our relationships, we went into it. We didn't try to patch it back up or backtrack or take anything back. We went all the way in, and we just kept letting go of whatever we could let go of. And it was an intense couple weeks. And on the other side of that, we ended up coming to some of the deepest intimacy that we've had in our entire, 20 plus year relationship. We really are in this renaissance of closeness and love and truth-telling with each other that felt terrifying. It felt terrifying, every time we did it, especially at the beginning. And, even now it's still really scary to even speak, the most minor truths. But I feel like, that's how it is, isn't it? The fear of the fear is always the worst thing. And so for me, the fear of getting a divorce would be the worst thing. And that fear would then have me live a smaller life because I would be afraid that, that if I was all of me, then the worst thing would happen. And I want to just say that not being all of you is the worst thing that can happen. It is, because that is the whole reason we are, all of us, each of us here, is to be the whole of who we are. So all the games that we play out in front of that are just distractions. It's that distraction that has us avoid what we think is the void, but the void is actually full of the goodness and the wholeness of us, right? And so I find that endlessly. Viv and I have had so many conversations, during this very dramatic ride where, she walked away from a really certain job to come work here. And, it was as we were building. And so, we navigate by energy, and there would routinely be, every 4 months or 5 months or 6 months, and sometimes month to month, we'd have a conversation about a new direction is presenting itself energetically. And so everything is on the table. And what might we have to let go of? We might have to let go of paying you a salary, right? And tremendously scary. And by the way, we were also looking at letting go of paying me a salary, which also happened. And so as I say all of that, it's completely outside of the regular constructs of how we're taught to live, that there ought to be this like masculine structure where everything is predictable and known, and you do it this way and you have a plan. And what I want to say is it's not about that. And it's also not about that, right? So the mystics might use this talk as like, see, I'm right. This is why I don't land, and it's precisely the opposite of that, right? So mystics, your version would just be running all the time and not actually even being on a trapeze or going from trapeze to trapeze, but just kind of being up above the trapeze as watching. So the invitation is, would you be willing to let go of your running? What if you were willing to just energetically open up and say, I am not going to run away ever again. I only will take purposeful, direct, intentional steps that are informed by consciousness. And so that means you're going to probably need to stay and look more. You're going to need to deepen in and really excavate from where you are, and it's going to be different for all of us. And so, again, there is no, yes, you should do this, or no, you should do that. The only really constant underneath all of it is, this guiding force that's what under Lance and I's conversation and Viv and I's conversations and all of the uncertainties, we all know that essence is the safe place. So whenever there's a question of, like my husband and I we were working out a thing the other day where we were noticing this pattern, that happens between us where he presents a business idea and then I can see the highest and best good of that and whether it's an essence or not. And then I end up, criticizing the parts that aren't that. And then he has an essence around, not really wanting to he's very much in the present moment. So he doesn't really like to strive or drive or have to be committed to some plan that doesn't feel, honoring of his desire for spaciousness. And so, we were trying this on well, how do we communicate then? If I see it this way and you see it this way, how can we communicate where I'm not pushing you and you're not hiding out from who you really are? And what we ultimately came to was essence. We both need to get more in essence. I'm not right and he's not right. We both need to get fully in who we are, and then we can show up to have these conversations from a space of wholeness rather than I'm not going to be okay if you need that from me or if you want that or if that's who you are, So you can never go wrong with essence, and you will never run out of possibilities of things to explore from that space. And what I love about it is, it's I hate to say this because, control is not the point, but our egos really want control. So if you're looking for something to control, essence is the thing, because it is the one place where you actually can affect the result. You can affect the outcome. So if you're unhappy with what your partner is currently doing, You could hope all day long that he or she is going to change, but you're just going to end up being dissatisfied, even if they change, because the problem is not in them. The problem is in you thinking you're not complete without the change, you know? So let me just check. I think we do have a question. All right, let me just see. I can't actually see. Viv said we had a question, but I do not see it. So let me see if I can get it to pop up. Okay, one more. Let me just check one more place. Yeah, gosh, I don't see it. Sorry, guys. So if you do have a question, maybe just post it again in a new thread. If you're on the chat page, just post your question one more time at the very top. I'll see if I can see it easier from there because I'm not seeing it underneath any of the pictures. So good. All right. So is there any last thing I want to say about burning your life down? Oh, yeah. So one of the places that I've mentioned this before on the show, but someone I really admire and respect so much is Sarah Beek. And in her book, Red Hot and Holy, she gives a very detailed account of burning her life down to follow her transformational path and the painfulness of letting go of things that aren't aligned. And actually, when I read her account, it scared the crap out of me because I was like, I don't want to destroy my life. I have a really good life and I have kids and a marriage, which she doesn't. And I don't want to, I can't actually let go of not having a home or having a way to, make ends meet or having some stability for my children, And so it really frightened me because I could feel the immensity of transformation that was calling to me. And it was like, how am I going to do this without upending everything that I know and that I am and that I do, And so I still completely respect and love Sarah Beek. And what I feel is there are many paths. There are many paths with which we can do this. And the memo that I've been getting as I've been doing this deep soul alignment work with people is that the path of suffering is over. We no longer have to come to this life to, be burned at the stake and to have our children ripped from us and, all of those things that we have had in so many other lifetimes. But this is the life where we are actually laying the vibration of ease and grace and pleasure. We're exploring this upper end of the spectrum for the first time in what I can see, And so it really does feel like even with, and maybe especially with transformation, this is a place where we can play with what if we could expand in ways that felt better? And that doesn't mean expanding without things falling apart. It might mean just changing your story that falling apart means something, that letting go of a relationship means a failure, or that, that pain is even a thing. It can all just be this is a thing the ego's doing. This is a thing the mind is doing. But, what if we could come to this process with an embracing of, of course things are shifting and I'm calling it good, and really be calling it good, And I even wonder, do we need to label it good or not good, because it gets such a trap. So it's just like, I'm here, I'm present, I'm transforming. Of course, things are shifting. They're always shifting. That's transformation. A flower isn't, I'm looking at the little crocuses that are just preparing to open up, here in the spring. And, they aren't like measuring like, oh, I, only grew this much today, or I opened my bud and then it only opened this much, but now one leaf is falling off. They just fully live their purpose. They grow, they open, they soak up some sun, they're done, the leaves fall off. There's no mourning about that. There's no I wish that wasn't happening. They're not trying to paste their flower petals back on. They just embrace what's happening, and then when they're done, the leaves decompose, they go back into the soil, they nourish the bulb, it comes back up and does another thing. And I just feel like there's such medicine in that for us. if we can just embrace wherever we are on the path as exactly where we are meant to be. Calling it perfect, not perfect as in it couldn't be better, or not perfect as in we don't wish it would be different, but perfect as in whole and complete, because that's what is. And so from that space, we have such a bigger capacity to deepen into seeing what needs our attention, to excavating the parts that aren't actually us, to hear a truth that may be difficult to see or hear or speak, and allowing it to really nourish us all the way to our roots, so that, you know, as we step into our next iteration, we're doing so from a place of freedom and truth and fullness. Yeah. So that feels really complete to me. I am bummed that I can't see the question, if there was one. And so if you'd like to still share your questions, I will answer them over in the tribe. If you're not yet a member of the tribe, it's free. And we're at facebook.com/groups/Wild Soul Medicine Radio Tribe. And we have 700 or so women over there going strong. There's lots of deep and soulful conversation about all things essence related. So we'd love to have you join us over there as well. So for now, thank you for being all that you are, and for joining me here to play an essence once again. Until next time, bye for now.
We light a candle, our hearts awake. Illumination for God's sake. A revelation for God's sake. An inspiration for God's sake. Illumination for God's sake. For God's sake. For God's sake. For God.